As always, we begin our list off with a starter, and this time it's Infernape. Infernape is already known for being fast and powerful, especially on the physical side. You've got your Mach Punch, your Earthquake, Aerial Ace, Close Combat, and even Flare Blitz if you're so bold to give that a go. But while Infernape's physical prowess cannot be ignored, neither should its special side. It's a shame that its special attack options are so limited, but I guess we all can't beat Lucario. Flamethrower is still a powerful option to pick up via TM, but it's worth noting that you can get it from Chimchar at level 41 if you wanted to wait that long for some reason. I personally wouldn't recommend this though, just because both Monferno and Infernape perform very well in Sinnoh before you reach that point in the game. However, a much easier pill to swallow would be waiting to evolve your Chimchar until level 23, when it can pick up Nasty Plot. I bet you were wondering where I was going with all that special talk. Nasty Plot is one of those moves that's capable of turning a bad Pokemon into a good one. So giving it to a Pokemon that's already very powerful and fast? Well, I think you understand where I'm going with this one. Our favorite Fire Monkey is particularly frail, but unlike those bad Pokemon I mentioned earlier, if Infernape just gets one single Nasty Plot off, it's most certainly game over for your opponent, despite the limited move pool options. Kricketune is an unfortunate Pokemon in more ways than one, but then again, most early game bug types are, I suppose. This thing would actually be quite useful as an early game Pokemon on paper. It evolves at level 10 with a very respectable chunk of stats, and it matches up particularly nicely against all the grass types up to and including Gardenia and her gym. However, this learn set is utterly useless on so many levels. I don't mean to offend any Kricketune fans out there, but what am I supposed to do with this thing before level 26? And by the time you reach that point and pick up X-Scissor, your Kricketune is most likely sitting in your box for the rest of the playthrough anyway. Luckily, there is a way to give this thing some well-needed help before you reach that point. If you delay Kricketot's evolution until level 16, you can learn the move Bug Bite, but only in Platinum for some reason, so if you're playing Diamond and Pearl, just avoid this thing like the plague. Unless your plan is to get insanely lucky with Fury Cutter or Leech Life. Bug Bite is an excellent early to mid-game move, sporting a very respectable 60 base power, which is also Stab for our cricket friend, and has the same effect as the flying move, Pluck. Stealing your opponent's berries is obviously very useful, especially against gym leaders and other boss fights alike, such as Mars and Jupiter for example. I know it's not much, it's not like this makes Kricketune a good Pokemon or anything, but when you look at where this poor little guy came from, this is a pretty sweet upgrade. This next one is a little bit of a stretch honestly, but I felt that it was worth mentioning considering how generally poor Pelipper's move pool diversity is. I've always found Pelipper to be a bit underrated in my experience. I mean, this special attack stat is pretty solid, but outside of your typical water type setup of Surf and Ice Beam, Pelipper doesn't have a whole lot of options. Sure, you could pick up Shockwave, which despite its mediocre base power during the later stages of the game, moves that can't miss can always find a use somewhere. But that's it? That's literally just it? You could argue that there are a few other utility options at least that can fill up those spots, like maybe Roost or Tailwind I suppose. But it would just be nice to have a special flying type stab to cover some additional types that water and ice generally cannot. Well, that's where Air Slash comes in, which can be picked up by your Wingull at level 47. Yeah, it's a bit late, but it is before Victory Road in the Pokemon League at least. It is just far more powerful than all of Pelipper's other flying type options just in base power alone. It is a long wait to get it, but adding a few additional types to cover is always a nice offensive boost for your team. And speaking of a lack of move pool diversity, the Magnemite line has historically been one of the worst offenders. Incredibly powerful for sure, but typically you'll be pressing Thunderbolt and nothing else. At least in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, you do have the Flash Cannon TM. Otherwise, our second option would have been Hidden Power for the second generation in a row. Magnezone will typically run with Thunderbolt, Flash Cannon, and Thunder Wave as a decent utility option. But that fourth move slot is extremely wide open, often being filled in with another weaker electric type attack. Well, as it turns out, there is one additional option, and it can be picked up by the line's second stage. With a Heart Scale in hand, you can swing by Pastoria City and have your Magneton Learn Tri-Attack. Don't get me wrong, you'll still have some coverage problems, but having the option to potentially burn or freeze your opponent in addition to paralyzing them is pretty fun. Naturally, it's time to move on to some stone evolutions, and we'll start with a couple of quick ones. Mischievous gets Shadow Ball at level 37, and yeah, if you don't want to use your Shadow Ball TM on your Mismagius, then delaying your evolution to essentially get a free copy of it is pretty worth it in my opinion. And next up, we've got our baby mascot. You're really cute, but I still don't think you need to exist. Pichu is actually in a very similar situation with Chimchar, in that you can delay your evolution to pick up Nasty Plot, but in Pichu's case, it's even sooner at level 18. That's definitely not a long time to wait to maximize your future Raichu's potential. And being an electric type definitely helps in getting Nasty Plot set up sooner, with far fewer weaknesses when compared with Infernape. But yeah, just an overall great pickup that you can get super quickly. Roserade already has a pretty diverse and interesting move pool, even without the help of its pre-evolutions. You'll have your Sludge Bomb, Shadow Ball, Energy Ball, and even Weather Ball options if you're going for an all-out offensive approach. Jesus, that's a whole lot of balls. But if you want to build your Roserade from a more defensive/utility-based approach, you're going to need some help from its earlier stages. Luckily, there is definitely no shortage of options here. Leech Seed at level 16 is fantastic for obvious reasons, an absolute staple for any defensively focused build. You've got your Giga Drain at level 25 for some additional healing that you otherwise wouldn't get until much later. Toxic Spikes at level 28, which is really interesting, and I've always been fairly fond of these types of setups. Toxic at level 37 to help against bulkier threats that are a little harder to deal with. And if you have the patience, you can pick up Aromatherapy at 43 for some excellent team support, and Synthesis at level 46. Synthesis is really the big one if you're planning on using your Roserade to stall, and it works great on the Sun team as well. I really didn't realize how many options this line truly has at their disposal. You may have to put in a little more effort to get your Roserade just right, but the staggering number of possibilities are very much welcomed. Murkrow is one of the Gen 2 single-stage Pokemon that definitely needed an evolution, and thank God it got one in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. But Murkrow's transformation has a touch of uniqueness that most evolutions do not. Generally speaking, when Pokemon evolve, their stats obviously increase, but they usually maintain a similar stat spread most of the time. In the case of this line though, Murkrow's evolution in Honchkrow actually loses quite a bit of speed, while the remaining stats maintain a pretty similar spread. With that being said, I find it pretty ironic that the speedy Murkrow is the one that gets Sucker Punch via level up, while the slower Honchkrow requires assistance from a move tutor in order to get its wings on it. Gathering shards to trade in for these types of moves can be a pain in the ass for a casual playthrough or Nuzlocke, and unfortunately, you'll have to wait until your Murkrow is level 45 to obtain this fantastic move without the assistance of a tutor, so you'll have to decide for yourself whether or not it's worth it. Going back to Honchkrow's lackluster speed stat though, Murkrow can also learn Icy Wind from what I believe is the same exact move tutor. Honchkrow has a very respectable special attack stat, but more importantly, the guaranteed speed drop really helps the big boss Pokemon excel. It's not like its speed is so abysmal that it simply doesn't have a chance of going first ever, but it's high enough that only a single use of Icy Wind will usually be enough to flip the turn order in your favor. It's just a neat little option you can go for when creating your build. And unlike waiting to learn Sucker Punch via level up, you can probably obtain Icy Wind a lot sooner. I should really figure out the best way to farm shards and make a video about it. The tutors in Pokemon Platinum are just so useful. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. On to our last Pokemon for the video, and this one is all over the place. Obviously, being yet another stone evolution means that Clefable is going to have to rely on its pre-evolutions, and or whatever it can relearn via Heart Scale, which is not very good outside of Minimize, I suppose. All of the fully evolved Pokemon on this list so far that have more than one evolution have received their benefits exclusively from their first stage for the most part, and not their second. Clefable's line breaks this mold up a bit by obtaining completely different types of moves that its previous two forms do not share with each other at all. Let's start with Cleffa, who is the only member of this line that can pick up Charm, which I think comes built in, and Magical Leaf, which can be obtained at level 16. Charm is always a very welcomed utility option, especially in Gen 4 where there are a lot more physical threats this time around. And Magical Leaf plays off Clefable's solid special attack, and is the only grass type coverage you have access to outside of Solar Beam and Grass Knot. Plus, as I've mentioned before, moves that can't miss are always useful somewhere, especially on those pesky fog routes. Moving on to Clefairy, we can pick up even more utility in Lucky Chant at level 28 and Moonlight at 37. I don't currently have an opinion yet on Lucky Chant, as I haven't used it yet in a playthrough. Let me know in the comments what you think of this move in a Nuzlocke setting. It seems very niche, but I'm sure there's a use for it somewhere. Moonlight though is great, and healing options in general should always be considered on any Pokemon that has access to them. Clefable's got some pretty nice bulk to it too, so I'm thinking you'll want to pick that one up. And last but not least, the coverage options get even more interesting with Meteor Mash at level 43. So Cleffa gets Magical Leaf and Clefairy gets Meteor Mash. It's so random, but I love it. Even though Clefable's physical side is lackluster in comparison to its special stats, a 100 base power move with the chance to increase attack is usually enough to overcome such deficiencies. Overall, I love these potential options to experiment with, and I'm hoping to give some of these moves a try in future playthroughs. And with that, this video is now over. If you liked this video, be sure to check out the one I did for Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald as well, and look forward to future installments. I'm really looking forward to utilizing what I've learned in making this video in my future playthroughs. As always, please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more content like this. That's it from me. I'll see you next time.